Welcome back to the War Room. Today we're going to be doing another army review, and we're going to be looking at the Fyreslayers. I really like this army a lot. The model range is not super deep. They kind of all look the same as far as dwarves go. You just have the same guy. He's on the Magmadroth. He's got a different weapon, but I like the way that they play. I think it's really fun, and I think they have some really cool rules. So before we get too far into this, like this video, subscribe to the channel. We got more stuff coming out soon, but let's get started. So starting with the battle traits, you have these runes that you can use. One of them is at the start of any turn. One of them is a hero phase, shooting phase, movement phase, combat phase. We'll go through each one of these. So the first one is the Rune of Fury. This is once per battle per army at the start of any turn. You can only use each of these if you haven't used any gold runes in the battle round. So you can use one per battle round. You kind of have to just time out what you want to do. So this first one, the Rune of Fury. For the rest of the battle round, friendly Fyreslayers units have strike first while they are in combat with an enemy that charged in the same turn. Especially since it's the start of any turn, you can do it in your opponent's turn because you assume that they're going to be charging you, and then you get strike first, which is really nice. So it's kind of like a deterrent for your opponent to want to try and fight you. And then the next one, the Rune of Fiery Determination. Once again, once per battle. This one is in any hero phase. Friendly Fyreslayers units have a ward of 5+ for the rest of the battle round. You have that one that gives you strike first. This one just gives you a 5+ ward for the rest of the battle round. So you probably break this one in your turn, go in and attack, you get a 5+ ward. When they try and clap back, you still have that 5+ ward. And then the Rune of Farsight. This one is in your shooting phase. Pick any number of units within 10 inches of visible friendly Fyreslayers units to be the targets. Roll a d3 for each target on a 2+. Inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. That one doesn't seem too crazy. It's just kind of chip damage. Of all of them, I think that's kind of the least useful one. But it's 10 inches of any Fyreslayers units. Everybody that's within 10 inches of you takes d3 2-up mortals. It sucks that it's d3 2-up, because a lot of times you roll 1s and 2s and you don't get to use that. The Rune of Relentless Zeal. This is in your movement phase. For the rest of the battle round, friendly Fyreslayers units can use charge abilities even if they used a run ability in the same turn. So run and charge is really awesome, especially right now because we're seeing a lot of Magmadroth spam. So running and charging with your Magmadroths is pretty dang awesome. And then the last one is in any combat phase, the Rune of Searing Heat. Melee weapons used by friendly Fyreslayers units have crit mortals for the rest of the battle round. So that one's good as well. It doesn't affect your companions, so your Magmadroths aren't going to be affected by this, but the riders will. But that's your battle traits, so you kind of plan out how you want to use these, when you want to use these as you go. It can kind of set the tempo for you with the run and charge one, and then it helps you to avoid, on your opponent's turn, you get strike first, or if someone charges you, you get strike first. That's a fun one. The 5+ ward is really good to kind of deter your opponent, or at least to be able to kind of tank some damage. Moving on to the battle formations. The first one, Warrior Kin Band. The Berserk Kindred. Add 1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Fyreslayers infantry units that charged in the same turn. So this is only for infantry, so if you're going to run a whole bunch of Berserkers, the Hearthguard, all those guys, and you want to be +1 to wound, this is a good one to do it. You're wounding on 3s most of the time. Getting down to 2s with this would be great. But if you're going to run Magmadroths, don't run this one because they're not affected by it. The Forge Brethren, the Bulwark of Molten Stone. Add 1 to save rolls for friendly Fyreslayers infantry units while they are wholly within friendly territory. This one is a little tricky. Once again, it's infantry only. So if you're going to sit back and let your opponent come to you, this one can be really awesome. But if you want to be a little bit more aggressive and get out there and fight, I don't think this is the way to go. But if you want to kind of castle up, let your opponent come to you, I think this is a great one to do. And then the Scales of Volcatrix, Ancient Bloodlines. Add 2 to the health characteristic of friendly Magmadroth units. If you're running Magmadroths, this one is probably the one I would do, because the Magmadroths hit like a truck right now, and giving them 2 extra health is pretty awesome. We'll get to some of the Warscroll stuff with the Magmadroths in a little bit, but there's a reason people are taking 3 or 4 of them in their lists. And then Lords of the Lodge, Martial Pride, and Stubborn Will. Add 3 to the control scores of friendly Fyreslayers heroes. In addition, the control scores of Fyreslayers heroes cannot be modified by enemy abilities. Some control score manipulation. I probably don't take that one. But this kind of gives you 3 of the battle formations, kind of give you an idea of how you want to play. If you're going to take a bunch of Magmadroths, Scales of Volcatrix. If you want to be really aggressive, but take Infantry, the Warrior Kin Band, because you're +1 to wound if you charged. And then the Forge Brethren, if you want to kind of castle up and sit back. 3 very different play styles with this army, which is really fun. And then the heroic traits, you can give one of these to one of your non-named heroes. So Blood of the Berserker, add 1 to charge rolls for friendly Fyreslayers units while they are wholly within 12 inches of this unit. Pretty awesome. The Ashbeard, if this unit is not a priest, they have priest 1. If this unit is already a priest, add 1 to the unit's chanting rolls. And then Fiercely Competitive, if this unit is in combat with an enemy unit that has strike first, this unit has strike first. If this unit is in combat with an enemy that uses the all-out attack command, add 1 to hit rolls for this unit's attacks for the rest of the turn. So essentially they just mirror whatever unit they're in combat with, which is pretty nice. I would probably do the Ashbeard because your prayer lore is really good and very, very strong. We'll get to that here in a second. The +1 to charges, if they're wholly within 12, is pretty awesome as well. But those are probably the 2 that I would do. And then Artifacts of Power, same deal. You give one of these to a hero, a non-named hero. You've got the Ash Cloud Rune. This is once per battle in the enemy hero phase until the start of your next turn. Friendly infantry units cannot be targeted by shooting attacks while they are wholly within 12 inches of this unit. Anybody that's wholly within 12 of the guy using this cannot be shot, which is nice. The Droth Helm, add 1 to hit rolls for companion weapons used by friendly Fyreslayers units while they are wholly within 12 inches of this unit. This is really strong. You can kind of see the Magmadroth spam coming into play here. You run with the Scales of Volcatrix, they're +2 health. You give him the Droth Helm, +1 to hit, wholly within 12 of him. Very, very strong. And then the Draft of the Finest Magmalt. This is once per battle in any combat phase. Add 3 to the attacks characteristic of this unit's melee weapons for the rest of the turn. That doesn't affect the companion weapons. Giving a hero 3 more attacks is very strong. So I'd probably go Droth Helm here, and then the Draft of the Finest Magmalt, and then probably the Ash Cloud Rune. Shooting isn't super strong right now in this season because of all the Scourge of Ghyran obscuring rules, but we are seeing like triple cannons. We're seeing the new Hellsmiths of Hashut artillery that are coming. We're seeing some pretty heavy shooting things that can be effective in the game, so that could be a play later, but right now it is not the move. And then moving on to the prayer lore. First one, you've got the Prayer of Ash. This goes off on a 4, so you pick a priest, pick a visible Fyreslayers unit wholly within 12 of them to be the target, then make a chanting roll of d6. Subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks that target that friendly unit until the start of your next turn. If the chanting roll was 8+, also subtract 1 from the Rend characteristic of attacks that target that friendly unit to the start of your next turn. So -1 to wound is really strong. And then if it's an 8+, right, you've been banking points, -1 to Rend is really good. And that's all attacks, that's shooting and combat, which is really awesome. And then the Prayer of Grimnir's Fury. This goes off on a 4 as well. Pick a friendly Fyreslayers priest to chant this prayer. Pick a visible friendly Fyreslayers infantry hero, wholly within 12 inches of them to be the target. The target can use 2 fight abilities this turn. After the first is used, however, this target has strike last for the rest of the turn. If the chanting roll was 8+, also add 1 to the wound rolls for the target's combat attacks for the rest of the turn. So you can give an infantry hero fights twice. On an 8+, giving a +1 to wound is really cool. So if you have an infantry hero, this one can come into play. But I think this one, the Wrath of Volcatrix, is what you're really going to be praying as often as you can because of the Magmadroth spam that's going on right now. But Wrath of Volcatrix goes off on a 4. Pick a friendly Fyreslayers priest to chant this prayer. Pick a visible friendly Magmadroth unit wholly within 12 inches of them to be the target. Then make a chanting roll of d6. For the rest of the turn, the battle damaged ability has no effect on the target, and add 1 to the attack characteristic of the target's companion weapons. If the chanting roll was 8+, For the rest of the turn, add 1 to the attack's characteristic of the target's companion weapons for every 4 damage points the target has instead. So not only do you just ignore battle damage, you get +1 attacks. If you super and it goes off on an 8+ because you've been banking points, for every 4 damage points you've taken, you get an extra attack. So that's pretty insane, just as is. There's a whole bunch of ways you can buff the Magmadroths. Once again, we'll get into the warscrolls here in a second because the warscrolls are also just insane with these guys. It's a very strong army right now. Very scary. And then moving on to the manifestation lore, we've got the summon Runic Firewall. These are not spells, they're invocations. So this goes off on a 4. So if there's not one, you have a priest chant it, they roll a d6, and then they set one up wholly within 12 inches and visible to them. And then the profile, 3-up armor save, no move, 8 health, banishes on a 7+. And then it has the Roaring Rune Fire ability. So in the enemy movement phase, pick up to 3 enemy units within 6 inches of this manifestation to be the targets. Roll a d3 for each target on a 2+. Inflict amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll, and subtract 3 from the target's control score for the rest of the turn. It also has a 6-up ward save. It kind of just blocks people out and then does chip damage into enemies, which is kind of nice, but nothing too crazy there. And then summon the Molten Infernoth, same deal. A priest can cast it. It's d6. It goes off on a 6, so you probably have to be banking some points to do this. And then you set one up wholly within 12 inches of the chanter and outside of 9 inches from all enemy units. Its profile, 5-up armor save, 8-inch move, 10 health, and banishes on a 7+. Ranged weapons, it's got the Raging Torrents of Lava, 8-inch range, 2 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s, rend 2, damage d3, with shoot in combat, which is really nice. And then for melee weapons, it has the Molten Claws, 6 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 2s, rend 1, damage d3, with crit mortals, which is very, very nice. There's a reason this thing goes off on a 6. It also has a 6-up ward save, and then at the end of any turn, you can use the Flame Scarred ability. Pick an enemy unit that had any damage points allocated to it this turn by this manifestation's attacks to be the target. Subtract 1 from wound rolls for the target's combat attacks until the end of your next turn. It doesn't say combat attacks. It could be the ranged attacks too, which is nice. Molten Infernoth is very good. I like it a lot. The model's really cool too. The last one we've got is the Zagron Flame Spitter. It goes off on a 4. Once again, pick a Fyreslayers priest, chant on a d6, and they can set it up wholly within 12 inches of them and visible to them. And then its profile, 6-up armor save, 6-up ward save, no move, 5 health, banishes on a 7+. And then for ranged weapons, you've got the Magma Blast, 18-inch range, 8 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 1, with crit 2 hits. And then it has the Magma Blast passive ability. Add 1 to hit rolls for this manifestation shooting attacks if the target unit has 10 or more models. Add 1 to hit rolls and wound rolls instead if the target has 15 or more models. So this thing can kind of slice through hordes a little easier, but it doesn't have melee profile, so it's just going to be there and shoot and cause havoc that way. But I like their invocations there. They're pretty awesome, especially the Infernoth is very strong. But now we'll hop into the War Scrolls. The first one is the Auric Runefather on Magmadroth. 4-up armor save, 6-up ward save, 10-inch move, 14 health, 5 control. Ranged weapons, you've got the Roaring Fire Stream, 10-inch range, hit 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage d3, with anti-infantry +1 rend, and the companion keyword. And then for melee weapons, you've got the Latchkey Grand Axe, 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 2, damage 3. And then the Magmadroth's Claws and Horns, 6 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 2s, rend 1, damage 2 with the companion keyword. And the Magmadroth's Blazing Maw, 2 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 2s, rend 2, damage 3 with the companion keyword. So the profile in of itself goes pretty hard, but it's all of these abilities here that make the Runefather so good. So battle damage, while this unit has 10 or more damage points, the attack's characteristic of its Claws and Horns goes down to 4. And then Raging Inferno. This is once per turn per army in any combat phase. Pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target. Roll a dice on a 3+, subtract 1 from save rolls for the target for the rest of the turn. It's a pretty awesome rampage. -1 to save on a 3+ is awesome, essentially making you rend 2 and 3 with everything. Very, very strong. And then Warrior Kings, this is once per battle per army in your combat phase. For the rest of the turn, add 1 to the attacks characteristic of melee weapons used by friendly Fyreslayer units while they are wholly within 12 inches of this unit. Any Fyreslayers unit wholly within 12, +1 attacks, does not affect companions. And then Volcanic Blood, if you make an unmodified save roll of 1 for a combat attack that targets this unit, inflict 1 mortal damage on the attacking unit after the fight ability has been resolved. So if you roll a bunch of 1s to fail your saves, those are mortals back onto the attacker. So the Runefather is awesome. That -1 to save on a 3+ is very strong. And the +1 attacks wholly within 12. It's once per battle, but it's really strong. Like if you need to just kill a whole bunch of stuff, that's the way to do it, I think. And then the Auric Rune Sun on Magmadroth. 4 up armor save, 6 up ward save, 10-inch move, 14 health, 5 control. The Fire Stream, the exact same, 10-inch range, 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage D3, anti-infantry +1 rend, and the companion keyword. And then for melee weapons, you've got the ancestral weapons, 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 2, with anti-monster +1 rend. And then the Magmadroth's Claws and Horns, and the Maw, exactly the same there. Battle damaged, when it's taken 10 damage points, the attack's characteristic of its Claws and Horns goes down to 4. And then you have Vying for Glory. Each time this unit destroys a monster, add 1 to the attack's characteristic of this unit's ancestral weapons for the rest of the battle. This unit can be affected by this ability multiple times, and the effects are cumulative. So if you're just monster hunting with this guy, you can just keep on building attacks as long as he's the one that's killing a monster, which is pretty awesome. So he just kind of can get steamrolling and gets really strong by the end of the game. And then Dominating Roar, this is once per turn per army at the end of any turn. Pick an enemy monster in combat with this unit to be the target. If this unit has fewer damage points than the target, subtract 10 from the target's control score for the rest of the turn. So essentially, you're going to be controlling whatever point, if you're contesting an objective or whatever, -10 to the opponent's control score. If you've taken less damage than them is pretty awesome. And then Volcanic Blood again. If you roll a 1 for your saves, then you do 1 mortal damage back. And all of the Magmadroths have that. And then the last Magmadroth unit is the Auric Rune Spider on Magmadroth. 4 up armor save, 6 up ward save, priest 1. 10-inch move, 14 health, 5 control. The Fire Stream, same deal. The Latch Axe, 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 2. The Claws and Horns and the Blazing Maw, same deal. Battle damage, once it's taken 10 damage points, the attacks of the Claws and Horns goes down to 4. And then Runic Empowerment, this is in your hero phase. Pick a friendly Fyreslayers unit wholly within 12 inches of this unit to be the target. Roll a dice on a 3+, add 1 to wound rolls for the target's attacks for the rest of the turn. So you can kind of see the synergy that these guys give off to other units. And if you have Magmadroths next to each other, it gets pretty gross. It gets really strong, really quick. And then his Rampage is the Lashing Tail, once per turn per army in any combat phase. Pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target. Roll 2d6. If the roll is equal to or less than the number of models in the target, inflict d3 + 3 mortal damage on the target. I love a d3 plus whatever. D6s suck because a lot of times you roll a 3 or lower and then you just feel bad. But a d3 + 3, you're automatically getting 4 damage no matter what. Up to 6 is so much more consistent. But this is one of those things where you actually want to roll low with the 2d6. I feel like a lot of abilities and things you want to roll, the higher you roll, the better. But this one is 2d6. And if it's equal to or less than the number of models, then do d3 + 3 mortal damage. So against single units, against other monsters, not great. But against hordes, this almost goes off every single time, which is awesome. And then Volcanic Blood, if you roll a 1 on your saves, that does some mortal damage back. And so he's your priest too, so he is the one that unlocks all of the invocations and the prayer lore. So I think you kind of have to take, or if it's the one on foot, that's kind of, I think, the move. But now we'll get to all of these guys on foot. So the Runefather on foot, 5 up armor save, 6 up ward save, 4-inch movement, 5 health, 2 control. With the Latchkey Grand Axe for his melee weapons, 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 2, damage 3. And then he has the Royal Retinue, once per battle per army in the deployment phase. Pick a friendly non-hero Fyreslayers infantry unit within this unit's combat range to be the royal retinue for the rest of the battle. While this royal retinue is wholly within 6 inches of this unit, add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by the royal retinue, and this unit has a ward of 4+. So pick some guys while they're wholly within 6 of this guy, they're +1 to hit, and he gets a 4-up ward save, which is pretty awesome considering if they're not going to be on Magmadroths, you don't have a whole lot of armor in this army. A lot of it's on 5s, which is a little scary. So anything that can make your guys a little more survivable is nice. And then he has commanding presence at the end of any turn. Add the current battle round number to the control scores of friendly Fyreslayers infantry units wholly within 12 inches of this unit for the rest of the turn. That's a pretty strong ability considering that, like, if you get to turn 3 or 4 or 5, you're plus that many onto your control score. So, and at the end of the game when things have died and there's not a whole lot on the board left, that control score can matter. This is one of the ones, I know we joke around all the time about Games Workshop trying to make control score a thing. This is one that I think actually matters a little bit more and can actually swing a game a little bit depending on what battle round it is. Next up, we've got the Auric Rune Sun on foot. 5-up armor save, 6-up ward save, 4-inch move, 5 health, 2 control. He's got the Ancestral Weapons, 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 2 with anti-monster +1 rend. So he still hates monsters. And then he has the Dauntless Assault. This is a reaction for when you declare a fight ability for this unit. Pick a friendly non-hero Fyreslayers infantry unit that has not used a fight ability this turn and is within this unit's combat range to be the target. The target can be picked to use a fight ability immediately after the fight ability for this unit has been resolved. So he just kind of chain links another non-hero infantry unit to go right after him. And then he has Fearless Charge. If this unit charges this turn for the rest of the turn, add 1 to charge rolls to friendly Fyreslayers infantry units while they are wholly within 18 inches of this unit. Wholly within 18 is pretty big. A lot of times you see abilities that are wholly within 12. So wholly 18 is pretty huge. And a +1 to charge from him. Going back to the heroic traits, you can do the +1 to charge while they're wholly within 12. Then I believe that gives you a +2 to charge since it's 2 separate abilities, which is pretty awesome. That's a way you could really kind of stack some things together. Moving on to the Auric Rune Smiter on foot. 5-up armor save, 6-up ward save, priest 1, 4-inch movement, 5 health, 2 control. For melee weapons, you've got the Latch Axe, 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 2. And then in the deployment phase, you can use magmic tunneling. Pick this unit and up to 1 unit in its regiment if neither unit has been deployed. Set up those units in reserve underground. They have now been deployed. And then that leads to emergence. So in your hero phase, pick this unit if it is underground. Set up this unit anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy units. Then set up the other unit that was set up underground with it, if any, wholly within 6 inches of this unit and more than 9 inches from all enemy units. So you can kind of deep strike. Relying on a 9-inch charge is a little scary to kind of get in there, but you can put these guys away and then bring them out in your hero phase, which is nice. A lot of these are in the movement phase they come out, but coming out in the hero phase is cool. And then the Auric Rune Master, he's the only one that doesn't have a Magmadroth equivalent. So 5-up armor save, 6-up ward save. He's a priest 2, and then 4-inch movement, 5 health, and 2 control. For melee weapons, you've got the Brazier Staff, 3 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 2. And then he's the High Priest of the Zogrim. Each time a prayer chanted by this unit is answered, this unit gains a magmic power token, which leads to Master of the Runes. So this is when you declare an Urgold rune ability, and those Urgold rune abilities are your battle traits. So each time you decide to do one of your battle traits and break open a rune, this is when this comes into play. Remove 3 of this unit's magmic power tokens. If you do so, apply the effect below that corresponds to the Urgold rune ability that was used. The Rune of Fury for the rest of the battle round. Add 1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Fyreslayers units while they have strike first. The Rune of Fiery Determination. Add 1 to save rolls for friendly Fyreslayers units for the rest of the battle round. Pretty awesome because that one is just +1 to save no matter where they are. And then the Rune of Relentless Zeal. Add 1 to run rolls and charge rolls for friendly Fyreslayers units for the rest of the battle round. The Rune of Searing Heat. Add 1 to the rend characteristic of melee weapons used by friendly Fyreslayers units for the rest of the battle round. And then the Rune of Farsight. Increase the range of the Rune of Farsight ability to 16. This is pretty awesome. So on top of, with the Rune of Fury, so on top of being strike first, if they get charged, they're +1 to wound. The Fire Determination, they get that 5 up ward save. They're also +1 to their armor save, which is awesome. And then the Relentless Zeal, not only are they run and charge, they're +1 to runs and charges, which is awesome. And then the Rune of Farsight, instead of it being 10 inches, it's 16 inches. And the Rune of Searing Heat, giving them crit mortals, they also are +1 to rend. So anything that doesn't mortal is +1 to rend. I don't want to say he's a must-have in the army, but with your battle traits, he just is like a force multiplier. Like all of those things in your battle traits are really awesome, and it's once per battle, but him adding on to whatever you're doing seems to be extra strong, especially since he's priest 2. So he just has to chant his prayers, get 3 magmic tokens, and then he can really buff your army. And next up, we've got the Battlesmith, 5 up armor save, 6 up ward, 4-inch movement, 5 health, 5 control. He has the Ancestral Battle Axe, 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 2. And then he has the Icon of Grimnir ability, ignore negative modifiers to the control scores of friendly Fyreslayers units while they're wholly within 12 inches of this unit. Classic control score manipulation. And then Bard of the Lodge, if a friendly unit wholly within 12 inches of this unit uses a rally command, you can make 3 additional rally rolls of d6. That's very nice. Just adding 3 more onto there if they're wholly within 12 in and of itself is pretty good. And then next up, you've got the Grimwrath Berserker, 5 up armor save, 6 up ward save, 4-inch move, 5 health, 2 control. He's got the Firestorm Great Axe, 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 2, damage 2. And then the Grimwrath Oaths ability. So this is in the deployment phase. Pick one of the following oaths for this unit to swear. I will guard them with my life. While this unit is wholly within 6 inches of another friendly Fyreslayers hero, add 1 to hit rolls for this unit's attacks, add 1 to ward rolls for this unit. So he gets to a 5 up ward save, and he's +1 to hit, so he's hitting on 2s, which is pretty awesome. And then if a friendly Fyreslayers hero wholly within 6 inches of this unit is destroyed, this effect no longer applies. I will not be stopped. Add 1 to charge rolls for this unit, and add 1 to save rolls for this unit while it is in combat. If this unit uses the retreat or rally abilities, this effect no longer applies. So if you can keep a hero alive next to him, it's great. But if that hero is destroyed, then he's not +1 to hit and +1 to ward. But the other one, if he's just +1 to charge and +1 to save, is fun, but he just can't retreat or rally, or that doesn't apply anymore. And then Battle Fury, this is once per battle in any combat phase. If he's in combat, it can use 2 fight abilities. The second one is Strike Last. So a classic. I kind of like him. None of these heroes are very tanky though, so you got to be careful. They're hit pretty hard, but they cannot take a hit. And then the Auric Flamekeeper, 5 up armor save, 6 up ward save, 4-inch move, 5 health, 2 control. He's got the Brazier Axe, 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 2. It's kind of a staple for all these guys, it seems like. And then once per turn per army in your hero phase, you can use the Master Flame Rune. If any friendly units have been destroyed during the battle, pick a friendly Fyreslayers infantry unit wholly within 12 inches of this unit to be the target. Roll a dice. If the roll is equal to or less than the number of Fyreslayers units that have been destroyed during the battle, pick one of the following effects to apply to the start of your next turn. Grimnir's Grit. The target has a ward of 5+. Grimnir's Resolve. Add 2 to charge rolls for the target. Or Grimnir's Vengeance. Add 1 to the damage characteristic of the target's melee weapons. So if something has died, then this ability gets stronger. And the longer the game goes, the stronger this ability gets, because it's just a higher chance that it goes off, because you have to roll equal to or less than the number of units that have been destroyed. So like if it's 1, you have to roll a 1, but if it's 5, you have to roll a 5 or less, which is awesome. It's not awesome that you don't have that many units on the board probably, but I can see that +1 to damage coming in very handy here. And then moving on to the Doom Seeker, 5 up armor save, 6 up ward save, 4-inch movement, 5 health, 2 control. He has the Doom Seeker weapons, 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 2. And then he's Oathbound, so in the deployment phase, pick an enemy unit to be this unit's quarry. You can pick a unit that has been deployed in reserve, add 1 to hit rolls and wound rolls for attacks made by this unit that target its quarry. If this unit is destroyed while it is in combat with its quarry, inflict 3 mortal damage on this unit's quarry immediately after the ability that destroyed this unit has been resolved. So kind of in a blaze of glory, take 3 mortal damage, which is pretty awesome. And then Runic Power, add 1 to the damage characteristic of this unit's melee weapons while this unit has 1 damage point. Add 2 to the damage characteristic of this unit's melee weapons instead, while this unit has 2 or more damage points. So if he's taking any damage, he's doing more damage out, which is pretty awesome. It's a dangerous game considering he only has 5 health and not a whole lot of saves. So if you somehow get hit and are able to not die, you're doing a ton of damage back. And then the Grimhold Exile, 5 up armor save, 6 up ward save, 4-inch move, 6 health, 2 control. It's got the Fire Rune Hammers, 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 2, damage 2. He has the Last of the Lodge Fire ability, so once per battle in any combat phase, pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target. Roll a number of dice equal to the target's health characteristic. For each 4+, inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. And you would do that instead of your normal fight because that is a fight ability. So if you just wanted to try and make sure something was going to die and it had a ton of health, you say, here's all these mortals, take it. And then Honor to Grimnir, once per battle in your hero phase, pick up to 3 friendly Fyreslayers infantry units wholly within 12 inches of this unit to be the target. You can reroll charge rolls for the targets for the rest of the turn. So 3 units, get a free reroll on a charge is pretty awesome. A lot of times we see it's like you get 1 free reroll from the guy, but his is 3, which is nice. And then moving on from the heroes now into the units. First unit we've got is Volkite Berserkers with the bladed sling shields. 5 up armor save, 6 up ward save, 4-inch move, 2 health, 1 control. They have the Fire Steel weapons. 2 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 1. And then they have the Berserk Fury. Each time a model in this unit is slain by a combat attack, and that model is in combat with the attacking unit, roll a dice on a 5+, inflict 1 mortal damage on the attacking unit after the fight ability has been resolved. So as these guys die, 5 ups 2 mortals back into the attacking unit, which is pretty awesome. We love seeing some death mortals. And then we have the Volkite Berserkers with the Fire Steel weapons. 6 up armor save, 6 up ward save, 4-inch move, 2 health, 1 control. They have the Fire Steel weapons, 2 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 1. They have the Whirlwind of Destruction ability. Add 1 to the attacks characteristic of this unit's melee weapons if this unit charged this turn. So if they charge, they're 3 attacks, and just the weight of dice hopefully is able to kill a lot of stuff. And you have other ways to buff these guys, right? With the Rune Father, who gives up +1 attacks. If they charge, they get +1 attacks. You've got the Auric Flamekeeper, who can give them +1 damage. Like, you got ways to make these guys hit extra hard, and that goes for any of the infantry units. And the next unit we've got is the Auric Hearthguard. 6 up armor save, 6 up ward save, 4-inch move, 2 health, 1 control. For ranged weapons, they've got the Magma Pike, 12-inch range, 2 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage D3 with shoot in combat. And then the melee weapon is also the Magma Pike, 1 attack, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 1. So they're not as good in combat, but they have shoot in combat, so if they do get stuck, they can still blast away with the Magma Pikes. And then Molten Rock Bolts. Each time a shooting attack made by this unit scores a critical hit, subtract 1 inch from the target unit's move characteristic until the start of your next turn. This ability cannot reduce the target unit's unmodified move characteristic below half. So for all the crits, -1 to move is a very interesting rule. I really like this army because I feel like this is a very creative army. Outside of the model range being really small, a lot of their rules are things that like we don't really see as just like a copy and paste across the rest of AOS like we're seeing. Like this ability, the Molten Rock Bolts, seems very specific to these guys and a very just interesting mechanic to have. And then moving on to the Vulcan Flame Seekers. 5-up armor save, 6-up ward save, 4-inch move, 2 health, 1 control. So each model in the unit has Vulcan weapons, and then 1 out of the 9 is a Kindledroth and must replace their weapons with Ember Teeth. The champion is Vulcan Runefather and cannot replace their weapons. So the Vulcan weapons are 3 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 1, with anti-monster plus 1 rend. And then the Ember Teeth, which is the Kindledroth, 1 attack, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, no rend, damage 2, with crit mortals, and the companion keyword. And then they have the Drothmaster's ability. So in any combat phase, pick an enemy monster in combat with this unit to be the target. Roll a dice on a 3+, subtract D3 from the damage characteristic of the target's companion melee weapons for the rest of the turn. So they're kind of the anti-monster. Not so much that they're rend 2 into monsters, but it's not going to be a whole lot of damage. But the minus D3 from the damage characteristic is very interesting. I'm not seeing these guys on the board a whole lot, but I think there's some play there with these guys, and they're cool models. They're really the only different ones from the rest of them. And then the last 2 units we're going to get to are the Hearthguard Berserkers. These are the ones with the Flame Strike pole axes, 6-up armor save, 6-up ward save, 4-inch move, 2 health, 1 control. Melee weapon is the Flame Strike pole axe, 2 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 2, with crit mortals. And then Duty unto Death. While any friendly Fyreslayers infantry heroes are wholly within this unit's combat range, both this unit and those friendly units have a ward of 5+. A lot of the units, it's scary because they have a 6-up armor save, so rend 1 just goes right through. But these guys giving out that 5-up ward save to another hero and themselves is key, because a 5-up ward save is very solid. And then Smoldering Braziers. At the end of any turn, pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target. Roll a d3. On a 2+, inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. So just some chip damage at the end of any turn. So at the end of every turn is very nice. And then the Hearthguard Berserkers with the Berserker Broad Axes. 6-up armor save, 6-up ward save, 4-inch move, 2 health, 1 control. Melee weapons, they have the Berserker Broad Axe, 2 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, rend 1, damage 2. They also have the Duty unto Death, so if a infantry hero is wholly within their combat range, 5-up ward onto both of them. And then they have the Fires of Vengeance. While this unit is within the combat ranges of any damage-friendly Fyreslayers heroes, add 1 to the attacks characteristic of this unit's melee weapons. So you can get up to 3 attacks with these guys. They don't have crit mortals like the pole axes do, so take that for what you will. I think I would probably go with the pole axes, the same amount of attacks. And then the last thing we're going to get to is the Magmic Battle Forge. 3-up armor save, no move, 8 health, no control. It's cover, impassable, and obscuring. So spending the Forge, this is once per battle per army in your hero phase. Pick a friendly Fyreslayers priest within this terrain feature's combat range to expend the power of the Forge. Heal D3 for each friendly Fyreslayers unit on the battlefield. Once this ability has been used, this terrain feature cannot use the Molten Blessing ability for the rest of the battle. So the Molten Blessing ability is at the start of any turn. Pick a friendly Fyreslayers priest within this terrain feature's combat range to be the target. Add 1 to chanting rolls for the target for the rest of the turn. In addition, the target can use the Unbind ability this turn as if it had Wizard 1. This is the only way you can get an Unbind without using Places of Power, obviously. +1 to chanting is really good, especially if you have the Rune Master just sitting there right next to it, just building up those magmic power points that when you do break those runes, he can buff everybody else as well. That's kind of what I see this used for. A lot of the faction terrain is hit and miss. Like, a lot of it just doesn't really come into play later on in the games. At the beginning, it kind of can sometimes, but this one, like, if you use spending the Forge right at the beginning, then you can't use Molten Blessing for the rest of the battle, and then, like, why is it even there from then on? So you kind of have to pick and choose. And spending the Forge is a little tricky because your priest just has to be right next to it the whole time to be getting Molten Blessing and then to use the healing ability that it has too. So if you want to castle up, I think the Magmic Battle Forge is awesome. If you're doing like a castle build and you kind of wait for your opponent to come to you, great. But if you want to be aggressive and get out there, I don't really see this coming into play a whole lot. But that is the Fyreslayers army review. I really like this army. I had the chance to play against this army in the 2v2 part of the Las Vegas Open, and our opponent was playing all Doomflayers and then 3 Magmadroths, and it was a nightmare. It was so scary because the Magmadroths just hit so hard, especially right now with the Scourge of Gyran rules that they have. They're very, very tough. I'm not going to go over Scourge of Gyran rules in this video, obviously. This is a scary army. They don't have a lot of armor, and the ward saves being 6+ most of the time is a little scary, but this army hits like a truck. So if you can get into things and hit first, you're going to be just fine. I think the model range is a little lackluster. I wish they had some more stuff because they all just look the exact same. I imagine stuff's coming for these guys whenever they do get their new book and they get some new units. I think it's going to be cool. Their prayers are awesome. The invocations are awesome. If you haven't already, give this video a like. If you've played the Fyreslayers, please leave a comment down here. Let us know what you think of the army. Let us know what you think of the review. If there's anything we messed up on, go ahead, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. But we will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.